Good evening, and welcome to the second version of the Ed Talks. We're coming to you live from the Ed Asner Family Center in Southern California, and we have an incredible talk today. With us live, we have the women of autism, or some of the women of autism. We have, but first let me introduce my co-host and my co-founder.
Oh my gosh, you remembered I was sitting here.
I did.
Thank you, that's nice.
This is Nava Paskowitz Asner, and she is my co-founder of the center, and so much more. Hello, Nava.
I would thank you. Thank you for introducing me. I know there are times when Matt is used to being a solo host, and this is all new for him. But we are a partner, and we're a partnership. And this is actually a Ed Talks that I put together. It's very close to my heart. These are very strong, very wonderful, inspiring autistic women that I love and I admire. And I'm so happy to have our panel tonight. And I would like to introduce my friend Amy Fagan. And Amy was in our very first Camp Ed. She helped me create it. She helped me run it. We created kind of the whole concept of the expressive arts camp together. Amy is an amazing artist and so much more, an educator. Should I not say where you educate?
Well, I work at Bridges Academy.
She works at an amazing academy, Bridges Academy.
We educate the twice exceptional, so autistic and highly gifted.
And all of the women on the panel tonight are autistic.
Yes. And next to me to the right is the amazing Chelsea Darnell.
Hello.
And where do I begin? I've known Chelsea since she was in first or second grade. First grade. So I've watched her grow up. I've seen her blossom into this amazing pillar of the community. And I'm so proud that Chelsea is also the Ed Asner Family Center social director.
Thank you.
She is co-running our amazing new dating spectrum, and really just an inspiration. And I'm so proud of everything that Chelsea has done. And I'm so proud that you're one of our Women of Autism panel. So welcome, everyone.
There's another person.
And I'm going to let you take that next one.
Okay.
I was sharing. Sharing
and
is
we
caring.
have Amy Gravino joining us. And Amy is coming to us from New Jersey. We should be having one other.
Yay!
Oh, there we go. There we go. You see? There we go. And then Lindsay Nebeker is joining us as well.
Yes.
So we have the group is here. The group is here, and I think we should just get into the questions, because we do have a bunch of questions that we've had our audience and our friends in the community send us, and so these are all from people in the community who want to know these answers to these questions. So I'm going to have Nava ask the first one.
Well, I just want to finish our introductions a little bit more. So Amy, really quick, just tell us a little bit about what you do for people who maybe don't know you the way I know you, and Lindsay also, because Amy, both Amy and Lindsay are so incredible. And just give us a little bio on yourselves.
Sure. Well, I'm a relationship coach in the Rutgers Center for Adult Autism Services at Rutgers University. I'm also a professional public speaker and the president of my own organization, Ascot Consulting, which I founded in 2010, and through which I'm an autism consultant, and I offer mentoring services and coaching for individuals on the autism spectrum and their loved ones and families. I'm a writer. I'm currently working on my first book called The Naughty Audie, which is a memoir of my experiences with dating as a woman on the spectrum. And I currently serve on the boards of directors of several autism organizations.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
And Lindsay, tell us a little bit about Lindsay.
Well, I juggle a few different things. So I'm actually a development specialist with the Autism Society of America. I've been working for them for about 9.5 years now. And then also, in addition to that, I also have 16 years of experience in freelance presenting and developing workshops and trainings. And so sometimes Amy and I actually cross paths at conferences. So it's always nice when we get to reconnect. Yeah. But yeah, I just basically have been doing that. And so I'm living in the Washington, D.C. area. And I don't know what else you wanted to know right now, but yeah.
And I don't know if any of our viewers have seen Lindsay in Autism in Love, Did I get the name right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's an incredible documentary, and that's how I first was introduced to Lindsay. And I love her story of her husband and her relationship. And I'd love you to come and be one of our speakers, both of you, at the Dating Spectrum eventually, because it was really inspired by those kind of shows. So I'm going to start.
I actually worked with Lindsay at the
I
Autism
remember
Society
that.
of America
Yes.
for a couple of years.
An organization we really love and are standing
And
behind.
please say hello to everyone for me.
Okay, so should I take the first one?
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. We have so many questions, and we kind of took the best ones. I'm not trying to take anyone's question and not use it, but we had so many questions, overwhelming response. And the first question is from Rachel. Should I give last names as well?
I don't think we need to give
Okay, I'm
last
going to give
names.
first name.
Yeah.
So Rachel asks, here's a question for the panel. What is the best way as an holistic. There's a new word.
So a person
You're
who's
supposed
not
to have taught
autistic-
me that already.
I taught you this word.
Did you?
It's a person who is not autistic but may or may not be neurotypical.
Ah, okay.
So you're holistic, you're not autistic, but you're also neurodivergent.
Yes. So, holistic parent, to honor who my child is, while we are also balancing social and cultural norms of my community, and having my child do what they need to do, but they don't want to do, like attend school. School avoidance is a big issue for us as a family.
Who wants to take
That's
that?
very hard.
I could try and take this one.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to answer to this person and say I actually believe the climate is changing. Now it's about, what kind of schooling. There's homeschooling, there's, specialty art schools. What does your kid enjoy? And maybe there's a school where they can have that interest sort of flesh out more. So
100%.
So now our understanding is it's not just, reading, writing, arithmetic anymore. Now, more and more schools are putting more of an emphasis on what children actually want to grow up to be. So the better question is, and it's honestly up to you, is what kind of school?
I agree completely. And that's kind of like what Bridges did.
Right.
And that's to Matt and I have 3 autistic sons, and each one of them has a different interest, and find out what that child's interest is, and,
Brains
inspire
want to
them.
learn. If a kid isn't going to school, there's a reason they're not going to school.
Exactly. And maybe it's something they're not sharing with their parents, or they haven't found their inspiration yet.
Just going off a little bit of what you were saying, are we ever going to get past Common Core? Are we ever going to get past Common Core? Are we ever going to?
I don't teach Common Core.
Well, but most accredited schools, I believe, have to.
Yeah.
Well, when you're
Common
saying
Core.
Common Core, are you talking about the specific content, or are you talking about the way it's delivered?
I'm speaking of the content. I'm speaking of the content.
That's.
I
So-
think that there's a certain extent to which every person needs to have foundational knowledge, and I think that most of that is contained within the Common Core. The way that our school teaches is very different from how a traditional, typical school would teach, with much more experiential learning. So I think that there's a way to deliver that content.
I actually agree with you.
And there should be more schools like Amy's school, and less schools that are, just putting everyone in the same, trying to put a square peg in a round hole.
Well, and I've seen different schools do it different ways. So the ways that I think really works is like the round table discussions that happen in some of the schools that are creative with Common Core.
Right.
So.
But I want every kid to leave high school knowing their role as a voter and a citizen.
I agree with you.
Wow. You better get to the next question.
I just want to remind everyone, we are live right now, coming to you from the Ed Asner Family Center, and you can actually be part of this show or these talks. And please, if you have a comment, if you want to ask a question, please do so in the comments section. If you're watching on Facebook, you can comment on Facebook. If you're watching on YouTube, you can comment on YouTube. If you're watching on Twitter, you can comment on Twitter.
Tweet.
So you can tweet. So, but our next question is, and I'm going to ask this. I'm going to actually ask this of Lindsay. Lindsay, what has been your greatest challenge?
Oh my goodness. I have to think about, I mean, there's been a lot, but I think, you mean my greatest challenge in myself, or just greatest challenge when it comes to navigating the rest of the world?
I would say your greatest challenge in relation to navigating the world as an autistic woman.
Yeah. So I think my greatest challenge is being often misunderstood and misinterpreted, and how much that really has taken an effect when it comes to my entire life, whether it be my education or the friends that I had, or my career, all these different, and the public's perception of me. So I think that it's kind of like one of those tricky things, because I grew up knowing, right? So I was diagnosed when I was 2. So my family and I knew from a very long time, but I was trying so hard growing up to learn how to mask myself and to learn how to try to fit in as much as I could to the norm, so I wouldn't get this unwanted attention and that I wouldn't really stick out. And I, especially, you know, like when I was growing up and becoming more of a public figure, I was so worried about, you know, being teased and so forth, if any of the, you know, if I wasn't putting on that mask. And I realized that after, especially with the film, and there was a lot of feedback into, you know, a lot of people were thinking that, you know, I seemed inauthentic, and I had kind of hurt because I knew it was because of the mask. It wasn't because I was being truthful, and I thought I was being authentic because I worked too hard on trying to mask myself. Yeah. Now there's like criticism that I'm masking myself too much. And so it's figuring out how to convince everyone of my true authenticity, which I believe in, you know, and how much of the mask to show and to not reveal. Does that make sense?
Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot to have to.
It's kind of a long-winded answer, but
a day of our lives.
Yeah. I think that autistic
Right?
women in particular feel more social pressure to mask than more masculine genders might, but it's exhausting. It's fatiguing.
Yeah.
Amy, I'm interested in hearing from you on this question as well. Do you want to comment real quick?
Sure. Well, I mean, I had to smile when you asked it, because like Lindsay, it would be hard pressed for me to pinpoint one thing that's been my greatest challenge. And definitely being misunderstood has been a tremendous part of it. And the place where kind of I tend to go off on a different trajectory than a lot of autistic women is that I am a failed masker. I tried to mask, you know, I would copy what my peers were doing, exactly say the things they said, do the things they did, but it was always wrong when I did it, because I am constitutionally incapable of being anyone other than myself. So what I had to do was go through a number of years where that was not okay, and being me was not acceptable, and I was suicidal, and I had to wait until I found the people and the place where I could be myself and where that was finally accepted. And, you know, like Lindsay, I've had that similar kind of thing where now I have a public profile as well, and people, you know, want to tell you who they think you are. And this happened when I was in school too, when I was, you know, 12, 13 years old, and, you know, whatever my peers thought of me is how I saw myself. I had no self-esteem. So if they called me ugly, which they did every day, I thought that I was ugly. And now I obviously have a great deal more confidence, and I don't let what people say about me define who I am, but it still can hurt me. I still, you know, have that happen where the things people say will cut into me when, you know, when they come from the community, especially that I feel responsible to as an autistic woman, which is other autistic people. So that's become, I think, one of the great challenges for me is balancing my what I feel is my responsibility to my community with my responsibility to myself as a person and as an autistic woman.
Awesome answer.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I would skip to the last part of the question.
Okay. For self-advocates, what experiences have made you become stronger advocates? And who should we start with?
We
start with
well, we
Chelsea?
start with Chelsea.
Oof.
What experiences have made you become a stronger advocate?
That's a really good question, and it's honestly hard to come up with an answer, because I've been diagnosed for a very long time. I was also like Lindsay. I was about 2 when I was diagnosed, but I didn't know exactly that I was autistic until I was 18, and the reason that is because my family didn't really want. I was already struggling with another diagnosis, which is my OCD, and my parents and my family, they wanted to make sure that I didn't put myself into a box, and that the issues I was having with my OCD, that I get a handle on those, which I'm still doing to this day. And I think it was better that I find out about my autism when I did, because I was at a place where I was more mature, where I could actually hold myself accountable and separate my diagnosis from anything. And I think just finding out my diagnosis, working in the special needs community, it was just a very natural progression to what I do today as a self advocate. That's pretty much my answer.
Okay.
Great. Wonderful.
Does anyone else want to comment on that?
I
Amy?
operate on spite.
You operate on spite?
On spite. It
Okay.
was literally, I had a professional mentor who told me that I could not possibly know as much about autism as he did because he'd gone to school for it. And I'm autistic. I might know a little something about autism, and that's sort of, I ended up enrolling in a graduate program. I'm studying to get a degree in education in neurodiversity. I'm gonna get a doctorate after I finish that master's, and then nobody will be allowed to say that they know more about autism than me.
Well, let's talk about that for a sec, because this is something. I mean, I've been involved in this world for quite a while now as a father,
Yep.
and and a brother, father and a brother. And I see, I've seen over the last couple of years, and maybe you can all comment on this a little bit, and I'm throwing this in, sorry guys. I see a lot of changes going on in the world of autism, and I see a lot more emphasis put on, what the autistic person thinks. And that was something that, 10 years ago wasn't the first thing everyone thought about. But now I think that we're really kind of graduating into this world where that's happening. And I applaud that. I think it's great. It's needed.
Insane
it's essential.
that we even have to
I mean, it's
say
ridiculous
that
that what you just said. I mean, yes, that person's been to school for years and years and years, but you obviously are living it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like each of you to talk about that and say, where do you think we are in our journey, and where do you think we'll end up in our journey?
I don't think that you can advocate for any marginalized group without the input of that group. I don't think that we could run any kind of social justice charity for a racial group or a romantic orientation or a neurotype without those people taking the forefront of their advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows what an autistic person needs other than an autistic person. So I think it's been good for our community. I think that it's been a painful transition because our pedagogy about autism has 200 years of history of not listening to us. And there's been some growing pains and there's been some discomfort and pushback. I think we're starting to push through that phase, hopefully, and reaching a point where we get more communication and collaboration. I would love for holistic parents of autistic kids to see other autistic adults as a valuable tool to understand their children and understand how to best meet their children's needs.
And that everyone listens to each other more, because everyone has a say, everyone has a right, everyone has their selves best interest and their child's best interest, and neither are less important.
And at home, I'd like maybe you guys to
Lindsay,
at home, and I'm
Amy?
saying Lindsay and Amy, you're at home. maybe you can comment a little bit about this, or if you have something to add, love for you to do that.
One thing I would just like to add is that I think we have been making progress, but I also think we still have a lot of more work to do. And the way that I perceive it is that we're not only needing to do more work in having the people outside of our community have a greater understanding and acceptance of the neurodiversity community, but also our own community. I sense that, well, and I don't know if other people here might be able to speak to this, but I personally feel like the harshest in the fighting and the online bullying and the worst things that I have ever been told or said came from people in the autism community, not out the autism community.
Yes, I want to like piggyback off of that so bad because I completely relate to this because it hasn't happened to me directly. I actually think, and this is going to ruffle a lot of feathers, but it seems that there's a good amount of people that would agree with me on this. We are actually not progressing at all because what's happening is, yes, autistic voices are being listened to, but only if they have something intellectually knowledgeable to offer. Even in terms of like people who are nonverbal, nonverbal people seem to only be valued when they don't have an intellectual disability. Autistic people with intellectual disabilities are being silenced more than ever, and the way the other thing people don't realize is that autism is not a personality trait. It's a condition that I don't think needs to be cured, and it's certainly intrinsic to who I am, but it's not easy. It's not something that I would actually wish on another person. I think for the people who have it, I think we have a lot of beautiful things to contribute, but it's not something I would wish on a person, because I think because it's really not easy. And I think a lot of people, the loudest voices in the autistic community are people who can speak, people who can mask really well, people who don't have an intellectual disability. But then there's a huge chunk of us who have, but the problem is they don't know what it's like to have speech struggles. They don't know what it's like to have intellectual disabilities. They don't know any of this stuff. And I think a lot of the advocates in our community do not realize how much privilege they live in.
Heavy stuff. Amy, you wanted to talk about some things that happened to you recently. I mean, there was some bullying recently.
There was, yes, absolutely. I agree with every single thing basically that Lindsay and Chelsea said. They were dead on. They covered much of what I was going to say. But I had some of the worst bullying that I have also encountered, specifically on Twitter, has been from the autistic community. And it's this thing that you have to be the right kind of autistic for some of these folks to think that you're worthy. And they are this vocal minority, but they are extremely vocal. So they seem like there's more of them than there are. But Lindsay, many of us, we're actually, I thought to myself, well, where are all the, you put me in any other room and I'm a flaming liberal. You put me with these people, I look like a raging conservative. It makes no sense. And I'm thinking, where are all the moderates, the autistic moderates? The answer is they're not on Twitter. They're out there in the community, in the world, trying to do things and trying to make changes happen. And so it's very easy to be vocal on Twitter. And I understand where a lot of it comes from. I understand that there are years and years of people not being able to have their voice heard, that now this is a platform that people can finally get their voice out there on. But this is all they have. They're using Twitter for that. But while the rest of us are out there actually trying on the ground, trying to make things happen. And that's a lot harder. And we're in the crosshairs. As I said, I have been attacked by more members of the autistic community than by neurotypicals, really, in my experience. And so that's where a lot of the struggle, I think, comes in. And you're right. If we want to be heard, we can't begin to, be working and trying to make inroads in the neurotypical world if we can't even communicate with each other, if we can't even have one voice to put out there. So it's a big.
I want to quickly jump in and ask a question of all of you, ladies, and that is, we're hearing from autistic women. Is this world that you're talking about, this social media world, this world of bullying, is it more treacherous for the autistic woman than the autistic man?
I think the world is generally more dangerous for women than men, and we find that threats of violence in social media need to be taken more seriously when you are a vulnerable person.
100%.
I definitely agree with Amy on that. I think it's definitely, just in general, unfortunately, women definitely, regardless of where they are in the social strata, women definitely seem to get the brunt of a lot of,
Criticism.
sexism. It is what it is. But there's also, I think this is sort of where the intersectionality comes in. It can be, it's harder if you're a woman and autistic, but then it might be harder if you're a woman and autistic and maybe BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Right. So where it all depends on the intersection. I definitely, all of my experiences are definitely, I definitely do have what would be considered like areas of privilege that I just grew up with. I'm white. I grew up in an upper class community. Not every person who is autistic or a woman has the privilege of growing up in that kind of environment. So all of my experiences are very personal to me, and they do come from how I grew up. And I know that for many people, it could be very different and perhaps a lot harder because of their life circumstances.
I would be curious to know if the nature of the bullying and toxic messages that I don't get these online, but I also very much limit my advocacy to in person for the most part, working with my students. And my students generally don't bully me, although I've called them out on it a few times. But I'd be curious to know if the vitriolic nature of these messages is the same as it would be for a masculine advocate. Because I think that some of it is because there is gendered hate.
Yes.
And that's really why I wanted to ask
That's
the
our
question.
that's our talk.
I agree
100%.
I kind of see that. And I mean, I know all of you from social media. I follow all of you on social media. I see, Amy, I've seen people bully you, and it's awful. And I think you're a very brave woman to be as honest as you are.
Thank you.
I think it's wonderful, all of you actually. But I have wondered if it's been if it's easier for people to go after women because it's easier, I guess. And it's an awful thing. But
it's easier.
I don't know. It's an awful thing.
Because we're held to different social standards.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
What I'm saying.
Thank you.
And I don't know. It's difficult for me. I'm the only guy up here, and I feel almost like a guilt that.
Feel guilty.
I do feel a little guilty.
Just a little, though.
I feel a little guilty.
Okay.
But can I ask this question real quick?
The next one?
Well, just this one. I just wanted to. It's kind of an offshoot of what we just did. So, as a parent and a brother, so how can we balance giving our growing children more their independence while still keeping them safe in the world? I mean, this is a good question.
Yeah,
because
and it's something I hear all the time from parents of girls, all the time.
And it's a good one to lead into. So let's
Amy Gravino.
Let's go to Amy Gravino.
Well, I talk about this. I give a presentation on transitioning individuals on the spectrum to secondary education, higher education. And what I often say is that we rely too much on that word independence when really what we should be teaching and focusing on is interdependence. So interdependence means that we all rely on other people for things in life. Nobody goes through this life without asking for help from someone. Like if I got clothes that say dry clean only on them, I'm not going to Google how to dry clean clothes at home. I'm going to go to the dry cleaner and bring my clothes there. And so that's what we should focus on more, because nobody is fully 100% independent. And and someone, may understand what different things are that we expect people to do, but it doesn't mean that there's a deeper kind of comprehension there either. And people can become afraid to ask for help. And I know that's certainly true for me as an autistic person. I've always been afraid to ask for help because I thought that means that I'm stupid and there's something wrong with me and I'm weak. But I know now asking for help is a sign of strength. But, we put so much emphasis on independence that it, and I know for me, I hold myself to higher standards than anybody else does. So if I feel like I'm not able to do something that everybody else around me is like, oh, you can do this, I will just get really far down on myself. It's like, one example I can give is with cleaning. I hate cleaning. I have tried, and finally the solution became I hired a cleaning lady. I got a lady who comes and cleans my apartment. Why spend hours, lambasting me and me going crazy and hating myself because I just can't bring myself to clean a toilet when I can pay somebody to do it, so sometimes there are simpler solutions,
Yes.
and interdependence is the way to go.
Love it. I love that. Well, I will come and clean because that actually soothes me. My OCD, I feel better when everything is just perfect. Okay, so I'm excited about this next question.
Okay.
Do you think that there are many women who may be autistic but are unaware of it, as the perception is that it's a male experience? Mm-hmm. Amy, you want to start?
I think that the majority of undiagnosed autistic people out there are probably women, because I think that the way that we identify autistic individuals is very masculinely coded, and that there are a lot of autistic women out there who don't know. What's interesting is that I find that the age that most women discover that they're autistic at is either very young, so like when you're 2 or 3, and then when they're in their early 30s because they have a kid who's autistic, and then they get diagnosed. So a lot of women are going through their lives just not knowing, because the diagnostic criteria are catering to masculine presentation.
Male-centric. Lindsay, you want to comment on that question?
That's going to be a really hard question for me to answer because I was one of the ones that was diagnosed very young, and so I can't speak for the experience of, it's hard for me to put myself in the shoes of a person who might be going through their lives without being aware of their diagnosis till later. So,
Amy? Amy
Yes,
G?
I was diagnosed at the age of 11, so I've pretty much known since then, but so many of the women I know are not diagnosed until they're in their 30s and 40s and even 50s, and I think an important thing to note is that a large part of the reason why women are underdiagnosed is because the diagnostic criteria that we use to diagnose autism were created observing boys. So we're expecting autism to look a certain way and to present in a certain way, and it doesn't necessarily present in that same way among women. And so I think, there's so many, I think there's just so many autistic women out there who just don't know, and then who are not even, it's this thing of, you have, like what we said, women are subject to the pressures of society as much as neurotypical women are. And so we're so busy managing everybody else's emotional needs that we forget to take care of our own. And, this is part of that.
Yeah, when Amy was talking, it just reminded me of one quick thing about diagnostic criteria. So when I was diagnosed it was in the early 80s, I know that the issues, not only because of some of the criteria that they go for might be more male-centric, but also cultural. It's cultural centric. So I was born in Japan. I lived with my family there in Japan for my childhood, and my parents actually flew me to Los Angeles to get diagnosed at the University of California, or Los Angeles. And one of the things that they did was apparently they were trying to see if I had an understanding of American currency. And so when they were talking with my parents after the evaluation and saying, well, she really failed at that part, not understanding the coins and dollars. And they're like, of course not, because she would only know about yen, which is the Japanese currency. there's cultural aspects to the diagnostics and things to work out.
Okay.
All right.
I'm going to ask this. This goes to Amy G.
Okay.
Because I've seen Amy.
That's your new DJ name,
Yes.
by the way.
I've seen Amy G talk about dating and the dating world, and this goes to you, and then I want you to answer it too.
Right.
Chelsea. Amy G, what do men need to know when dating women on the autism spectrum?
You got how much time do you have? Like,
That's global. I know that's a global question.
I mean, that's absolutely.
For Amy.
It's hard to know where to start, really. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, of course, first and foremost, and it seems so basic and obvious, but it often isn't. Every autistic woman is different, so we may share the same diagnosis, but we all have our own personalities too, and so you have to get to know us as people and not just as walking checklists of symptoms. Again, it just seems like an obvious thing, but it isn't always to people. I would say, when we say men, do you mean neurotypical men or autistic men, or all men?
Well, I didn't write this question.
Okay.
But it came from one of our viewers. Let's say, let's
Anybody
just say
who's
any man.
interested,
Anyone
anybody who's
yeah.
interested in dating an
It's not
autistic woman.
exclusive to the autistic world. So.
I would say that you may see an autistic woman and see somebody who is willing to love you with her whole heart, but you shouldn't even begin to come within 50 feet if you're not prepared to love back, because I have been on that side of it. I have cared for someone, told someone I love them, and they didn't say it back. And it is one of the most profoundly painful things that I've ever experienced. And you may see me, you may think that I'm fun in the short term, but I want to be around for the long haul. I don't want to be just someone you have fun with and then discard. And I think all too often men look at autistic women, they see people who are vulnerable, they see people who are wanting affection and validation. They see women who would be easy to manipulate. And if that's what you're looking for, well, first of all, you're a terrible person. You're a trash human being if you're just looking for someone to manipulate. But we deserve better. We deserve better than you. And I have standards now, and I can say that. So
sometimes autistic women are compared to the manic pixie dream girl trope. The idea that we're fun and we're quirky and we have an unusual motive set compared to neurotypical people. And we're not fictional characters, and we don't exist to fix the hole in your boring heart. Get a therapist. Because we're whole people, and we deserve to be loved back completely.
Well, and that leads me to say that you want what anyone wants.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yes.
that answer could have been from anyone, and it should be from anyone. That's the way we should all love, and period. End of story. Right?
Absolutely. I pretty much agree with everything that both Amy's have said today on this topic. Honestly, I think the advice that I would give to any man, regardless of their neurotype, and I'm going to just be speaking for me today, if any man, and I am straight, so if you are a man and you're interested in dating me, know that I am not a sheep. I am not going to sit there and just tolerate your norms. I need you to accommodate me the way I need to. And of course I want to accommodate, things if they, need it. But like, when it comes to like my struggles and what I want and my boundaries, they need to listen to me if they really want to invest their time in a relationship. Because I'm also in it for the long haul. And if you don't want a long-term thing, just say it. Like, I cannot, don't assume that we can just read the nonverbal behavior. For me personally, I need it verbalized to me. So it's helpful if you say directly without any, euphemisms and whatnot, like what you want. And I will not be offended as long as you tell me exactly what it is you're thinking.
And both Lindsay and Amy F are in relationships, so they can speak on a different in a different way, a different aspect of, and you guys are both in happy.
In it for the long haul.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take his last name.
But you found somebody who really understands you and respects you and is your best friend.
Absolutely. I think that if I had to give advice to somebody who said, I'm in love with someone and they're autistic, what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
I would say, ask them, because every autistic person is going to have different needs, we all have our own little brand of autism, our own little mix. And it varies very differently from one person to another. But I would ask them what their needs are, what their comfort range is, because I have a partner who is very aware of what I look like when I'm about to shut down, or what I act like when I'm hangry. And he's very good and he knows also that I'm very anxious about being seen as having an autistic meltdown, or being seen as not being completely in control of my feelings. I need to be on top. And so he's very good at sneaking me the help I need and whispering in my ear or asking me for a favor to get me out of bad situations. And that's a dynamic that has worked well. So I'd say if you're in love with somebody autistic, find out what you can do to help them navigate a world that isn't made for them as comfortably and easily as possible. Be the bridge across difficult waters.
And by the way, if that's not a role somebody wants to take on, that's fine. Just because not everybody has the capacity to handle that. I don't know even how. I have my own, like, there are certain people who have certain struggles, and I don't know if I would date them because I wouldn't know how to manage them. If you don't feel that you're in a place where you can help manage them and help us with that, that's fine. Just be honest with us about it.
And be sensitive and be kind and be respectful.
Yeah, just don't like be rude or ableist or anything like that. Like,
well, I mean, this is the way, like you had said before, this is the way anybody would want to be treated themselves. Yeah. And I've seen you a sketch, and you are incredibly sensitive to his needs. So it's really about being able
a gentle human relationship.
Yes, exactly.
Why have we? Why do we exist in a world where we think that could not, where that's difficult, that might be difficult for autistic people? I'm having a hard time kind of believing that we could ever think that. And so what are some of the reasons that we've gotten to that point? It's kind of upsetting to me, actually.
Are you kidding?
I mean, I think part of it is ableism and a lack of value of difference.
It's a terrible, awful thing.
It's a harsh world, the dating world.
And there's also a misconception that autistic people feel empathy or emotional capacity differently.
They don't feel.
Right, or that we don't feel empathy, which is hilarious. I've cried over bugs being squashed.
Although I will say, that's not it's not entirely untrue though, because there are a lot of autistic people that do struggle with empathy. It's not that they're heartless people who are, murderers. It simply means that they have trouble relating to other people in a way to
Lindsay, you spoke at the ASA conference about the difference between your personalities with you and Dave. And I was the blubbering mess in the back. I'm sure you could actually hear me crying, because it reminded me a lot of Matt and I, that we are so different, polar opposites. But his differences and your differences, you guys have made it work, and you're like the yin and the yang. And I just loved your description of, even though Dave wasn't as, and you see it a lot in the movie too, he's a scientist and he is very matter of fact and clinic, and his description of love, connecting it to his, you can describe it better than I can, but how he described affection and love being similar to the barometric.
Yeah, so I think what you're referring to is the metaphor he gives. His presentations. Yeah, so he also does presenting as well. He has this analogy of the stages of love like wavelengths. And I wish I had like the visual to show you, because I think it's easier to see the visual than describing. But it starts kind of with the quicker wavelengths, kind of the alpha, the beta, where it's kind of like that crush feeling and it's kind of like rushed things and it's just very, it's you may feel that love, but it's like when you get to the more the delta waves, that becomes more profound and deep, and it's the love changes. It's no longer like that fluttery thing you start to experience when you say you first dating someone and so forth, but it's very sustained. It's very more it's waves though. It's wavelengths, so it's going to go up and down. It's work.
And the way that Dave described it was just incredible. And if you guys haven't seen that movie, please do, because it's just beautiful. And okay, Matt, you wanted to you had, I think it's actually my turn.
It is your turn.
Is it? Okay.
It is your turn.
So this is my next one, right?
This one.
Okay. So for a panel, please talk about how the male, oh, this is another controversial one. Please talk about, I love controversy though. This is my favorite.
Yeah, you've never been one to shy away from
No, I
controversy.
definitely haven't. Please talk about how, I have 8 brothers and no sisters, so I can understand this one. Please talk about how the male-dominated services aren't right for girls and young women, and what do you wish was available for us?
Who wants to tackle that first?
That is a heavy one. The male-dominated services are not right for girls.
That's a tough one to answer, because I think that's actually, it's both a larger systemic issue, but then it's also a personal experience, because I've been lucky enough to have gotten the right services. Of course, not every person, especially autistic women, are so lucky. So they are disadvantaged by, systemic sexism, but a lot of services and research, and to go back to the research thing, like all of these things never really put assigned females at birth in mind in general.
Right.
I was like reading something once that like they were like studying, like these crash test dummies, and there was a flaw in like it was like a lot of like actually I don't know about that, but basically a lot of like the seat, there's like a lot of issues with like seatbelts, because a lot of the way like these things are made, like I think in cars, they don't account for bodies of assigned females at birth. So a lot of things in society just weren't made for us.
Yeah.
In general, just because like we're just not in the forefront of people's thinking. It's always just
or if they were created by men for
first.
men. Really.
Right. Exactly.
Do you want to touch on that, Lindsay? Do you want to touch on that one?
The one thing I will say is, when you asked that question, I immediately thought of the area of employment. I mean, I think it's really great that over, recent years, there have been, well-known corporations, and there's been companies that have been stepping forward to trying to collaborate and partner with different organizations to try and build the employment initiative, to try and recruit more autistic employees and to, grow their careers and so forth. But a lot of it's very technical. A lot of it's technical related jobs that seem to work. It almost is catering more to a certain subset of the diversity of the spectrum. And I'm hardly ever hearing about huge initiatives of trying to find employment for people who might be more creative or artists. Like, well, I don't know if that's necessarily a gender related thing, but that's just one thing I've noticed, is that I feel like because of a lot of men tend to let the technical, they get more advantage than females do in employment.
Do you want to take that one next, Amy?
I mean, I think that what you said is completely accurate, to be honest. And admittedly, while every autistic person is very different, what I do see is that the way that autism manifests in men and women is a little bit distinct based on gender. And more often you'll see that analytical organizational autism manifests more typically in masculine people, although I have seen it manifest femininely. And similarly, you'll see that more creative, emotive autism manifest more in women, although again, I've seen it in men. So I think that when you make that assumption about autism, that it is a masculine neurotype, that it presents in these particular ways that overwhelmingly the masculine community does present with, then when you create a job initiative for autism based on your limited assumptions about what autism is, you're only going to serve, that one small percentage of the community. I went to art school. I do not want to be a software engineer. You can't make me.
Very good.
Great answer.
Okay. This is from an anonymous
Ooh,
person.
anonymous.
So I don't know. So what defines a true ally for women on the spectrum? And do you have good allies? So those are two really interesting questions. So why don't we start with Amy Gravino?
Sure. Well, thank you, Matt. Well, what comes to my mind when I think of a true ally? I was talking before about how I've told two guys that I love them and neither of them said it back, and I've had my heart broken far too much for my own liking, and it's led me to feeling that I'm not a very good judge of character, and I know I'm not a very good judge of character, obviously, but my best friend, said to me, Amy, the next time you're interested in a guy, you run him by me first, and I'll tell you if he's good. And so rather than rather than being judged and being looked at and say, how could you be so wrong about this, how could you think that he felt this way, everybody was telling you that he didn't like you in that way. So none of that, just saying I'm here for you and I will give you my best judgment and support you in the future so that hopefully you don't get hurt like that again. That's an ally and that's a friend, and that's the most valuable thing in the world.
I'm just really interested in asking this question. I want to ask, this is a question that just came to my mind, and I really want to ask this.
You're going off the.
Well, no, I always do, don't I?
Yeah.
I am fascinated by asking this question, and I ask it of all of you. Do you all feel that your parents are your allies? Do you all feel that your parents are your allies?
Should I start?
Sure, Chelsea.
I would say absolutely. I mean, my mom, it's interesting because my mom and my dad have always, I think, been really great allies of mine, and they got me really the help I needed. But what's interesting is that there are people in the community that would look at my parents and they would be seen as not allies, because growing up, I had therapists. They combined elements of ABA and elements of other things. But they're not they weren't people these were not people who stopped me from growing. These were people who are not only they're not only my helpers, they're my family. And it was because of my parents that they're in my life, and they were there to help me grow, not help me be something that I'm not. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's interesting because we're in this sort of thing where a lot of some of the therapies I got would be considered unhelpful and controversial by today's standards. But the truth is, I think when it's done correctly by the right people, it can be very helpful. I mean, for me, it did make me into the person I am today. So yes, I have good allies, but another autistic person would look at the allies I have, and it breaks my heart to say this, but they would look at the people that are allies in my life, and they would not be seen as allies. But I see them as allies, and I'm so tired of having other autistic people will look at me and they will gaslight my experience because I had therapists and speech therapists and people who did elements of ABA that were actually looking out for me. And if you were traumatized by ABA, that's not supposed to happen to you. It's not. And that breaks my heart that people have been disadvantaged by certain people. But I want people to know, and I'm not saying anything about something being good or something being bad, but I want people to know that the people who helped me are good people, and they're people that I love, And it hurts when I'm told when people that I love would be considered bad people by other people in my community.
Well, thank you. Amy?
My mom is one of my best friends. You've met my mother.
I have.
So you know that she fights
amazing
for me.
lady.
But what I will say is that when we first encountered my diagnosis, I was 13 years old. I had been very depressed. I had been very combative. I was flunking out of school. I was not in a good way, and we didn't know why. And when she first got the diagnosis, there was, I wouldn't say I was more resistant to the diagnosis. I didn't want to be autistic. I fought back against that label tooth and nail at first. But there was a limited understanding on her end as to what autism was, because nobody knew really what autism was in the early 2000s fully. And she and I had conflicts early on about this, and I had to become a louder and more forceful advocate in order to get what I needed out of my relationship with my mother. At this stage now, we are best friends. She is the first person on the front lines. She fights for me, and she every now and then she checks in and goes, "Did I fight for you correctly?" Which is very important because she is allistic. She's not in our community. So the fact that she lets me take the lead on how I want to be fought for has mattered a lot in our relationship. She's my hero and she's my best friend.
Aw.
Anyone else want to comment on that question?
I will. I'll just say that both my parents were incredible. They raised two autistic kids, both very different. So I have a brother who's also autistic, but he's non-speaking. He doesn't write. He doesn't use communication device, and he lives in a community housing program with a lot of support. So very different situation than the situation that I'm in. And I've always been very I don't know, just humbled by the patience and the strength and, just the persistence that my parents had, even when there were these challenges involved. And just, I think because of the different dynamics of my sibling and I, all our family had just a tremendous understanding of how vast the autism spectrum can really be. And I think even though that might not have been something my parents had signed up for, it was something they thought, you know what, this is what we have, and we're going to just do the best we can to try and give these kids the best life that they can give. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Amy, do you want to touch on your?
Yeah, well, when I talk to parents about this and I think about parents being an ally, the first question that always comes to my mind is, are you listening to your child, or are you listening to your idea of who you think your child should be? Because it's not the same thing. And that's what a lot of parents,
So true.
when they're communicating with their child, when they're trying to tell their child to do, whatever, do your homework, go to bed, brush your teeth, whatever, they're thinking in their mind of what their child should be able to do versus what their child is actually able to do in that moment. And it doesn't matter if their child could do it the day before. If they may not be able to do it right in that moment, it doesn't mean they'll never do it again. But you have to listen to who your child is right then, and focus on that. And to that end, my mother has been my ally 5,000%. Since minute one. My father is more complicated because he's autistic too, although he's never been officially diagnosed. When I was diagnosed, it forced him to kind of re-examine his life through a new lens. And so there was many years, I guess we could call them the lean years, when I was a teenager, where he was there for me physically in terms of driving me to piano lessons and therapy and all that stuff. But emotionally, he was kind of absent because of everything that he was experiencing. And so for the longest time, I didn't feel like he was an ally, and it was very painful. And I am a grown-ass woman now, and still he can make me feel like I'm 12 years old when that thing happens. It's only your parents who can make you feel that way, where you just want them to say that you're good. And when he doesn't, it just puts me back in that place. And so he can make me feel wonderful, and he can make me feel terrible. And I know he doesn't mean to make me feel terrible, by the way, just as a caveat. I know he doesn't realize that how he says things matters as much as what he says. So we're working on that. It's a journey for both of us.
Well, I want to thank everyone. This has been a very insightful hour of
incredible. I think we could probably go
We
on
could
for
go on
another
forever.
hour.
I
And
think a
there's
long
so many
time.
questions, and you guys are all so inspirational to both parents and autistic individuals who are watching us right now. And I hope that our girls who are joining us virtually will come to the center. I know Lindsay has actually been to the center, but Amy, you definitely are coming soon, very soon.
Yeah, I'd love
And
to.
thank you guys so much. And let's talk about next month. Next month,
Yes.
on our third Ed Talk, it's going to be very exciting.
It's going to be all about the world of acting and how you navigate that as an autistic.
Mm-hmm.
Masking is a superpower in that context.
There you go.
Yes.
And
we're going to be working with Disney.
We're working with Disney on this. And
Disney Animation.
Disney Animation. And they'll be our guests, and we'll be talking about casting and about how you get into that world and how it's changing for the autistic actor, really.
Absolutely.
How the world of diversity in the entertainment industry is that's become a very important issue. So we're going to be talking about that next month. And I want to thank you guys so much. It's been insightful and wonderful. And
Thank you.
I felt challenging for me at times, but I think I survived. And
you survived as the only man amongst us.
But for you out there, we can't thank you enough for being with us and for taking the time to join us. The Ed Asner Family Center provides the Ed Talks for free to the general public. It's here for you because we want to educate the world and we want to bring the world together. And that's really why we're here. So we hope you enjoyed it. We hope you found it insightful. And we hope that you'll donate to the Ed Asner Family Center as a result, because that's why we're here. That's how we pay for our programs, because of people like you donating.
And join us next month, July 27th is our next Ed Talk on Disney and how to get into voiceover acting.
We thank you and we say good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.